We're here in the Tetons, where plenty of amateur photographers like Ansel Adams have tried to take good photos, but today we're finally going to do it.
Get out of here.
Hi, my name is Nate Luebbe. I'm a professional landscape and wildlife photographer. We've already talked about planning and packing for a trip, and we are here in the beautiful Grand Teton National Park. Let's get out and take some shots. We are here at Oxbow Bend, which is probably one of the most famous photo locations in North America, and we are waiting for sunrise. This is one of those locations that is unbelievably beautiful, so every photo you take is going to be great pretty much, but it's tough to find a new perspective. It's tough to try and take a photo that's unique. So I think this morning we're probably going to take some of the classics, and then I might move around and try to get a branch in the foreground or some kind of a different composition that's a little bit more unique, just see if I can find something that is different than the last 10 times I've been here. When you get somewhere like this that just has a beautiful row of mountains that stretches as far as you can see, it gets a little bit overwhelming. And so I like to start wide and then work my way in. So for like a morning sunrise at Oxbow Bend, for example, it's a really big dramatic scene. So I'll shoot it wide. I'll get the reflection, I'll get some sky, some water, trees on the side, and I'll take a couple shots like that to kind of get my bearings and figure out how everything feels. And then I'll slowly start to work my way in. I'll zoom in if I'm on a lens like the 24-70. If I'm shooting primes, I'll change lenses and work in tighter, and eventually start shooting, you know, tight telephoto shots, something at 70 millimeters, something at 100 millimeters, and kind of dissect the scene, start playing around with a foreground. Look for kind of cool things like maybe there's a beaver swimming across the lake that can add a point of reference or a little context to the scene. And that really helps me at least get started, because if you just jump out of your car and you see this beautiful scene and you just start firing away on your camera, you're gonna go home with 500 photos and maybe like 10 of them will be okay. And so I like to try and be methodical. And so for me, I start wide and I work my way in. There's really nothing wrong with taking a photo that's been taken 1,000 times before, because some of those classic photos are classics for a reason, right? I mean, Ansel Adams was here 100 years ago taking photos like his mega famous Snake River overlook. And it's a classic for a reason, because it's truly just beautiful. And I think there's nothing wrong with taking a similar composition and just having it be your version of that. The weather will be different, the lighting is different every single day, and it still is your photo, even if it's in the same location as 10,000 other people. There's a reason this series is about landscapes and wildlife, because obviously they kind of coexist, right? You're gonna see wildlife when you're out looking for landscapes. And I guess a perfect example of that is right here. We're at this beautiful landscape area looking to shoot some sunrise photos, but we have 2 beavers on the far bank over there. We've got some beautiful swans further down. I wouldn't be surprised if we see an elk or a moose at some point here just while we're shooting sunrise. So that's kind of why I call myself a nature photographer instead of just landscapes or wildlife specifically, because I like to be outside, and when you're outside, you never really know what you might see. Another great way to dissect your scene is to play with your perspectives, especially if you're shooting something with like wildflowers or these beautiful sagebrush in the foreground. Don't just stand and shoot from eye level. That's how everybody sees the scene. You're not going to make a super interesting or unique photo just standing there and holding the camera up to your eye. So crouch down, put some of those, you know, summer wildflowers in your foreground, get some of the sagebrush in your foreground. Look for maybe like a branch on a tree that you could have as an overhang, something to give a little depth to the scene and also kind of show some context of where you are, right? Everyone knows that the Grand Teton is back there and it's beautiful. But not everybody knows there's a bunch of mountains around it. They don't know about these beautiful meandering streams, all the wildflowers. So just showing some context of where you are helps capture the scene, helps immerse the viewer in your images, and it kind of helps you feel a little bit more like you experienced the park. You didn't just go snap the same photos as everybody else. You really kind of got to know your landscape and where you are.
So I am, of course, a big fan of unadulterated wilderness, but there is something to be said for documenting the way that humans experience and move through these landscapes. And for that reason, it's actually really fun sometimes to try and put a human element in the photo for some context. It gives some scale to the mountains, and it gives a little context to who's there and why. So in this instance, we found a really cool road. It's a perfect straight shot directly at the Tetons. And so I'm gonna have Autumn drive the van down the road. I'm gonna shoot it at somewhere probably around 300 or 400 millimeters, get some great telephoto compression to make those mountains look huge behind her. And it'll kind of show, I don't know, the triumph of the human spirit, how we're able to build roads through these magnificent landscapes. And I don't know, I like the way that it kind of tells the story that these areas are accessible and they're able to be visited by anyone who wants to. And it doesn't hurt when you have a super cool car covered in solar panels and a ladder, I guess. But, you know, it's no Ferrari, but it'll get the job done.
I can't believe we have this rainbow here. We have the moon. It's gonna be hopefully some astro potential later. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. This is incredible.
This is pretty much everything you could hope for. All the mountains. I'm hoping to get all the mountains in one frame. For me, for landscape photography, the two lenses that I could never go without would be the 16 to 35 and the 24 to 70. If you can only have two lenses, that's a great way to go because you are just covered for wide all the way down to tight. If you're shooting on something like the A7R5, you have enough resolution that the 24 to 70 really is more like a 24 to 150 if you're comfortable cropping. And especially if you're just sharing your photos on social media, that's way more resolution than you realistically need. And then beyond that, if you have a little money left over and you want to take your photos to the next level, I think some good filters are an incredible way to go. I use breakthrough photography filters, but I think a circular polarizer and a single ND is a perfect way to start, and you don't need anything beyond that. Add the gear if you think it might benefit your shot, but don't feel like you are lacking anything if you don't have all of these in your bag. But good tripod, a polarizer, and a single ND can take you so far. One little piece of gear that I think is overlooked a little bit is a nice clear filter to thread on the front of your lenses. That's something that I hike with quite a bit, and I've actually broken them several times. And I'm never super sad when I break the clear filter because it just means that I didn't break the front element of my lens. The clear filter is about $50 to replace, and the front element of your lens is going to be several hundred to $1,000 to replace. It's a pretty small piece of equipment to keep in your bag, and I definitely think it's worth that little bit of extra money. So I'm shooting a bunch of subsequent photos that overlap a little, so that I can stitch them together later and get a shot that's way higher resolution and wider than if I'd shot them all individually or on one lens. In addition to shutter speed, I think aperture is a really underappreciated tool in landscape photography. A lot of traditional old school landscape photographers like to shoot at f11 through f16. They want everything in focus. And that's a really cool trick also. And a lot of younger photographers now are shooting everything wide open at f2.8, like a ton of bokeh in the foreground or the background, really narrow depth of field. I honestly like both of them, and I don't think you should rule out either one, but it's a great tool to have in your bag to think about. You can even stop down and you can focus stack, you know, take a focused close photo, and then slowly move your focus back and you can stitch them all together in Photoshop. Thankfully, the Sony A7R5 has internal focus bracketing, so you actually can just go into the menu and it will take different focal plane photos for you, and then you can stitch them together. It's not super hard to do manually, but it's very cool to have the camera do it for you. When we started driving this morning, it was dismal out. It was actively raining. It looked super stormy. We definitely did not think we were gonna get anything. And it just kind of goes to show, sometimes you just have to put the time in and go anyways, and you never know what might happen. Sometimes you'll get skunked, and sometimes you'll end up with like one of the best surprises you could ask for. I'm pretty excited. I've been here probably 10 times before, and I've never actually had clouds over the Tetons. It's always just these like crystal clear mornings, and so You get these beautiful alpenglow shots with the sun hitting the tips of the peaks, but this is my first time seeing real clouds, and I'm really hoping they actually light up when the sun starts coming up. We're facing due west, which for sunrise is a little bit complicated, but it kind of looks like everything's coming together. I'm getting really excited. So I'm actually running a time lapse on my A1, and then I'm going to shoot some handheld stills on my A7R5. This is a pretty classic spot. It's got this beautiful curve. This beaver dam kind of slows the water down. You get these beautiful reflections. So I kind of look for leading lines. I love the symmetry of the reflections, but there's this really nice curve to the river. So you get this leading line as well. And I'm just gonna try and capture the scene. This isn't one where really like shooting detailed tight shots works super well. So I'm gonna be shooting pretty wide and just kind of capturing the whole landscape. This, thankfully, is not a scenario where you need a long exposure to get the shot. They can help, but this water is smooth enough already that the reflections are beautiful as is. And so I feel comfortable here even just shooting handheld. All right, so if you know anything about me, you know that I am obsessed with time lapses. And when I saw these clouds this morning, I knew that I just had to give one a shot. So I have a camera set up on a tripod. It's been running a time lapse for about the last half an hour. I did a 4-second interval because I wasn't quite sure how fast the clouds were moving. Generally for sunrises, I'll do 6 to 7 seconds, but you can never really slow a time lapse down after the fact. So I always will opt for a slightly shorter interval because if I end up with a 30-second time lapse that looks kind of boring, I can speed that up in post, but you can never add frames that you wish you had shot. So I'm on a 4-second interval. It's so crowded here that I don't want to have to like sit by my tripod and babysit it the entire time. So I have mine on aperture priority so that it will automatically adjust my shutter speed for me to balance the exposure as the light changes. But in general, my preference is to shoot time lapses full manual so that you can adjust the settings the way that you want to maximize the quality of your images. At locations, especially like this one in national parks, it is very busy. It's just me and 300 of my closest friends this morning. So if you've never been to a location before, it's really helpful to get there, like maybe the night before, just check it out so you know where you want to go, because you don't have the luxury of jostling around and trying to find a good composition in the morning because every spot's taken. So you kind of need to know exactly where you want to go ahead of time because you're pretty much elbow to elbow out here. It has been a lot of fun shooting some landscapes out here today, but the Tetons are famous for their wildlife, and I'm a wildlife photographer, so I can't wait to drive around and find some animals and talk to you about that. But in the meantime, I'm gonna pass it off to Autumn Schrock because she is the moon photography champion of the world, and we have a beautiful moon setting behind the Grand Teton. She's gonna show you some tips and tricks about that, and I'll talk to you later.